What's up, Pescados? Got another math lesson here for you. We're going to do ScatterPlots today. Our essential question is, how can you collect, organize, and display data? Our learning target is, I will represent data using a scatter plot. All right, what is a scatter plot? It's a graph that shows the relationship with two sets of data. The two sets of data are graphed as ordered pairs. With scatter plots, we look for trends and relationships. And don't let that freak you out. Here are our two sets of data. We have temperatures and snow cones sold. And we're going to compare them. If the hotter it gets, the more snow cones we sell, then we're showing a trend. So we're going to look at this a little more in depth. All right. So scatter plots are similar to graphing the first quadrant of the coordinate plane. We use X and Y coordinates from an input-output table. X we go right and Y we go up. So in this case we have 72 and we would go up to 6, and that would be our dot. And in this one we would have 73 and we go up to 5. And I know there's 72 and 73 because I'm at 75 here and we go backwards. Now you might think this looks a little weird, and that's because they're not exactly like first quadrant. And there are some differences. Notice the scale for both the X and Y axis are different. In this case, we've got 0, 10, 20, 30. Okay, and over here we have 75, 80, 85, 90. And so our axes are different. This one goes by 5, this one goes by 10. Also on this graph, the X-axis starts at 72. The zigzag tells us we're starting at 72, but the scale would really start at 0. They just didn't want to have a lot of blank graph here until we got to 72. It would have been nothing. So it's a waste of paper, a waste of time, really, and it'd be a little more complicated to look at. It wouldn't even fit on the screen, probably. That's why this little zigzag here. Now, they won't always have this, but they can, and that makes it different. If you remember when we did our first quadrant, the scales going up the y-axis and over the x-axis were the same. They were always the same. In this case, they do not have to be. Also, there are my arrows. I'm just pointing that out. Also, we look for a trend and not a multiplicative or additive pattern. In this case, we're thinking, well, hey, the hotter it is out, the more snow cones they sell. And if you'll look at some of these, which we're going to look at on the next page too, so we can see a little bit better some of the data, you'll see that our trend is going up. The more snow cones are sold, the hotter out it gets. All right. So what makes a good scatter plot? We need a title, snow cones sold versus temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. We don't have to have the verses here, but since it's two sets of data, then it doesn't hurt to have that on there. It really explains what it's all about. Speaking of which, here's our data and an input-output table. We need a y-axis, a scale, and a label. So here's our y-axis. Our scale, we already talked about, is going up by 10. The label is snow cones sold. We also need an x-axis, which is this way, a scale, and a label. Our scale is going by 5s, and the label is temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. And then we need to have our data plotted as dots. So if we come over here, we've already talked about these first two, and they showed up on the little graph we talked about up there. I just cut those off. But let's look at let's just grab another one and see. Let's talk about 85, and it should have 16. So if we go over to 85, then they sold 16. And you can just count up, that would be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So you'll notice it's 85 degrees out and they sold 16 snow cones. Whereas over here, it was 72 and they sold 6. And it was 73 and they sold 5. It doesn't exactly work out to where the hotter it is, the more they sold. Notice the most they ever sold was here on this one, and it was not the hottest day. This was 90. And then on this day over here, it was 91, 92, 93, 94. And they sold, was that about 25? We just go over here and look. 94, they sold 25. But on a day that was 90, they sold 27. But you can still see our trend as it's getting warmer. They're selling more snow cones, which kind of makes sense. So that's really all there is to a scatter plot. This one, if you have, this one's the X, this one's the Y, just like in the first quadrant. X was always in the first one and Y was always in the second one. Well, look, X is right here, and that's temperature, and that's going along the X axis. And Y, snow cones sold, is going along the Y axis. So that does not change from the first quadrant. On your copy that you're going to download, you will have this where you can make your own. Let's read it. Coach collected data from his basketball players for 1 week. The data is shown in the table below. Represent this data on the scatter plot. All right, so here's minutes practice at home. And I'm going to show you this in a minute. You have a place where you can put the labels and the title, but you can't be in presentation mode. So you'll see that in just a second. So you're going to put practiced minutes at home, minutes played in the game. So you want to see, is there a relationship between the more they practiced at home, were they better for the game? Like the coach put them in more so they could play more. And then right here it just says add the title and labels to the scatter plot by typing in the boxes. And I'll show you that in just a minute. And these will be movable. So scatter plots closing. It's like graphing in the first quadrant of the coordinate plane. X goes right, Y goes up. It's different in some ways. The X and Y axis can have scales with different intervals, and we saw some with 10 and some with 5. The scales do not have to start at the origin. That's another big deal. Like, those were the multiplicative and additive patterns, which we're looking for relationships and trends with the two sets of data. And we are not looking for the additive and multiplicative patterns, which would lead us back to this origin. That is scatter plots. Now what I want to show you is on your downloadable slides, you are going to have this. And on this page, you will see it says click to add title, click to add title, click to add title. Well, this is really only one to add title, but I can't change the wording in those boxes. But you'll be able to click here and you'll be able to type something. Then you'll notice there's already a dot out here. And it's over at 20 up to 10. Over 20 up 10. I've already put that one on. And I put more dots here for you to use and move around. All you do is just grab it and you drop it where it goes. Okay? And then when you're done, you can just submit it, turn it into me, and I'll go on and I'll check it out. But don't forget to add a title. Add a title. These are labels. And then add a title for the whole thing. And that's all I've got for you. Adios.